BookTok has gone totally viral. It's shaping the publishing industry in so many ways. That's how influential it's become. And also, most bookshops you walk into nowadays will have an entire section dedicated to BookTok favorites. Today's video is about all of the novels that I am so glad BookTok introduced me to. To be fair, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with BookTok. Sometimes I really enjoy the books that I find on there and the amazing diverse book recommendations. Other times I feel as though it's just a bit of a miss, you know? Certain books just haven't really lived up to the expectation, but these are all of the romance books in particular that have just been top tier, perfect escapism, swoon-worthy vibes. I've been blushing, giggling, kicking my feet, and I'm so excited to talk to you about them. First up, we have Ali Hazelwood's books. I don't know what in the crack she puts into her books, but I struggle to put them down the moment I start reading. To be fair, not all of these are 5-star reads. I do have my preferences over which ones I like more than the others, but honestly, this woman can write because I have never DNF'd any of her books. And when I've started reading them, I've usually finished them within a day or two, which is actually not that usual for me because I'm quite a slow reader. Something I love about Ali Hazelwood's writing is that she will always write strong female characters, and they're usually in STEM. So these really hot female scientists and their love story. They're also swoon-worthy, and it just has me blushing, giggling, kicking my feet, and having a really good time. First up, Ali Hazelwood's most popular book, The Love Hypothesis. This is probably my least favourite book off the bunch, but I did still enjoy reading it and I got to the end, so you know, I wanted to include it in the video. And it's probably her most popular book on BookTok. Like, this just went totally viral. Everyone was talking about it, and that's why I picked it up. So this is a story of Adam and Olive. Olive is actually a PhD student. She is at university and her friend accuses her of not having much of a dating life, which leads her on to actually kissing someone in the department to prove her friend wrong, in a sense. And that person just so happens to be Dr. Adam Carlson, who is actually a professor at the university. It leads on to a whole fake dating situationship. It's very cute, very fun, very romantic and swoony, and I really enjoyed it. The thing that I didn't like about it so much is that there were many scenes that felt unrealistic. Now, I only like that in my romantasy or my fantasy novels. When it's, you know, contemporary romance or rom-com, I want the romance and like the declarations of love and all the scenes to feel real, like they could genuinely happen in real life. I don't want it to feel over the top or just really unrealistic, and there were some scenes that I was just like, oh, that's a little bit cringy or a little bit unrealistic, but overall, I really did enjoy it, and I would definitely recommend people to read it. I believe this is Ali Hazelwood's latest novel, and I saw everyone talking about it on BookTok, and I was like, I need to know what the hype is about. This is the love story of Rue and Eli, and they're literally perfect for each other in so many ways. So Rue is actually a biotech engineer in a startup in food science, and Eli is the businessman who comes in with a hostile takeover initiative, and he just wants to take over the startup. So there's definitely a bit of an enemies to lovers vibe going on, and it was done so well in this. Everything just made a lot of sense. I know that enemies to lovers is generally done much better in fantasy, but I felt like it stood really well in this, and just like the whole concept, it worked. Now this is really steamy, okay? Like, I don't like too much smut in my romance novels, but like I did enjoy this. I think it was a tiny bit much for me, but I did enjoy it, and it just felt like it made a lot of sense because of the way the characters were. Because of Rue's childhood, she is very closed off. Just as a person, she's very, very closed off. Now, I'm not going to ruin the story. I'm not going to tell you too much about the plot, but you know, she had a childhood where she didn't always feel safe, basically, and so for that reason she's very emotionally closed off. She doesn't like to draw too close to people, and that's not just in her romantic relationships. You see that she has very, very few friends, and she's awkward in all social settings. And then in comes Eli, and he is just charismatic, handsome, a well-established businessman. He just knows his way with words, and he's the only person who seems to basically get through to her and get her to open up, and I just loved that dynamic even more than like the steamy scenes and the, you know, the spice, which I thought was done quite well, but I just loved the romantic element of how their personalities were so different yet they fit together so well. My favourite Ali Hazelwood book of all time. This is the only one of her books I've read that I will give a solid 5 stars to. The others are like 4 stars, 4.5 stars, but this, I actually really, really love it. So, Bride is basically a paranormal romance. I think this is the only thing Ali Hazelwood's written that's actually not rom-com or contemporary romance. It's paranormal, and I was a bit like curious about how she would do it, but she has done it so, so well. Bride is basically a novel where there's a marriage of convenience trope between a vampire and a werewolf. Oh my god, the chemistry, the banter, just everything was spot on. This had so many laugh out loud moments for me. Usually when I'm reading rom-coms and there are funny scenes, I'm like, I don't know why, it's just really hard to make me laugh. Not in real, I feel like I'm quite an easy laugh when I'm in conversation with people, but for some reason in books and even in some TV shows and films, it's kind of hard to make me laugh. And so I loved the fact that I just laughed out loud so many times when I was reading this. I felt like the swoon of the romance, I felt the humour, I felt the chemistry, I felt the banter, all of it was there, and the plot was plotting. It just felt so real. Even though it's paranormal romance, it's all about vampires and werewolves, it just felt real. And that goes to show that a novel is really well written. So Misery Lark is a vampire, and her father arranges a marriage of convenience between her and the alpha of the werewolf pack. And there's just a situation that I don't want to go too much into the politics of it. You'll get to read it when you read this novel, which you should definitely do. But basically it's to maintain peace between their species. They've been warring for a very long time, so there's this, you know, situation where they will get one person, like from the vampires, to marry somebody from the werewolves, and it's usually people of position. So in this case, it's literally the daughter of the most important vampire marrying the alpha of the werewolf pack. I am so thankful to BookTok for introducing me to this YA romance, because it's officially my favourite YA romance of all time now. I've always loved the academic rivals to lovers storyline and trope, and this is academic rivals to lovers perfection. So I hope this doesn't find you is basically described as Jenny Han's To All the Boys I've Loved Before, but with hate emails rather than love letters and love mail. And I just thought it was done so well. When I first heard that hook, I was like, how is that going to work? But oh my god, did she deliver. The author, Anne Liang, I haven't read much by her before. I think actually this is the only thing I've read by her so far, but I definitely want to read more of her work because I just thought the romance was done so well. It was like slow burn, you really felt the enemy's vibe, and then you really felt it when Sadie Wen starts to really realise that she's got feelings for her academic rival, Julius Gong. Now let me tell you a bit about them. So the thing that I loved about them is their dynamic. So she's the girl who is a total people pleaser and she's nice to everyone other than him. And he's the guy who really can't be bothered for anyone but her. He's like always trying to get a reaction out of her and he's always so attuned to what she's doing. So there's like this really cool dynamic there. Sadie Wen is a total people pleaser. She just doesn't live for herself. She lives to get the perfect grades, to be the perfect daughter, to be an amazing friend, and she never really raises her voice or shares her true opinion. She like suppresses it all in and then types it up into emails which are all in her drafts and she would never dare to send them out, but all of that suppressed rage and emotion is in her emails, the drafts, and then one day they get sent out and then it's like all hell breaks loose because suddenly everyone in school hates her because all the popular kids and all these other kids have access to all these emails where she has expressed her deepest, darkest thoughts about them, and some of them are related to how she didn't want to help them with schoolwork or share her notes and she felt like she was obliged to. And so yeah, there's all this like school politics going on, and then Julius Gong is the one that she wrote the most amount of hate emails to, and when he receives them it's really intense because the hate emails, you can sense that in them. She's like obsessed with him in a way because she's like talking about his like hair and just everything he makes her feel and like just going into detail about his appearance, and it's obvious how much she's noticed. I just love the way they were thrown together in so many different academic situations, and that really intensified the relationship between them, the rivalry and also the chemistry. It was such a satisfying book. I feel as though the ending was really abrupt. That's one thing that really annoyed me. Just when I thought that more stuff was going to happen, feelings were still developing. It just felt like, oh, okay, the end has come. And I think a lot of people did complain about that. It just didn't feel long enough, but that's also an indicator of how good the book is. You just don't want it to end. Stephanie Garber's Once Upon a Broken Heart series has been everywhere on BookTok for the longest time. Everyone's just obsessed with this, and I had to know what the hype was, so I picked it up. And you know what, I do get it. Now I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I'm obsessed with these books, like next level obsessed, because generally I like my YA fantasy and my YA romantasy a little bit more, I don't know, intense, or I don't, there was just something missing. But for what this is, I think it's brilliant because it has strong fairy tale vibes. It's whimsical, it's romantic, and most importantly, it's unpredictable. I think so much of the YA romantasy and even YA romance nowadays is so predictable. I think the tropes are just so obvious. But within this, there was an enemies to lovers vibe. It wasn't so intense, but it was definitely enemies to lovers in so many ways, because it's the story of like a hopeless romantic girl falling in love with basically the villain. And so yeah, there was definitely that element there, but I didn't think it was overpowering. I think it was done in a way that felt true to the story, and it also felt really unpredictable. I think so many enemies to lovers stories are just the same. The trope, it has been recycled so many times, and it's one of the most popular, probably the most popular trope on BookTok. But I thought this had done it in a way that just felt refreshing. So this is the story of Evangeline Fox. Now she's basically a hopeless romantic, and she just loves love, and things kind of take a turn for the worst when she finds out that the man of her dreams, the love of her life, is about to marry somebody else. So she looks for the Prince of Hearts, Jax, and she strikes a deal with him. He's charismatic and he's handsome, but he's also very devious, and he strikes a bargain with her that she basically owes him 3 kisses that he will collect at different times in whatever way he wants. So it won't be kissing him, it'll be her kissing whoever he says she has to kiss, because his kiss is actually something very deadly. Anyone who kisses him automatically dies. There are basically so many of the different tropes and themes that you would find in fairy tales, and yet Stephanie Garber has put such a fresh take on it and made it hers, and I just think it's an amazing spin on it, on, you know, these classic fairy tales, and I can tell exactly why these books are so popular. Now I'm going to be honest with you, Emily Henry is either a hit or miss author for me. I recently did try to read Happy Place, and I really tried to push on through around 3 times, and I DNF'd every single time, so it just wasn't for me. And I know that it's a book that so many people love, and if I posted about this on BookTok, I don't know if I'd get ripped to shreds, because I know a lot of people over there have been raving about how much they love both Happy Place and Funny Story. The fact that I didn't enjoy Happy Place made me not want to pick up Funny Story, but I don't know, I might give that a go at some point because I've heard great things. This book is, I would say, probably the most popular Emily Henry book on BookTok, and it's definitely the first one that I actually picked up by her, and I adore this book. It made me like giggle, it made me cry, it made me swoon. I felt so many different emotions throughout it, and that generally isn't the case when you read a romance book. You generally don't feel like it's so powerful, it's really staying with you. You know, generally you have a good time and then you forget about it the moment you put the book down. But with this, the characters of Augustus and January really have stuck with me. So they're both writers, and they are both suffering from writer's block, and they just so happen to be neighbours, and they're living in like the same area for around 3 months, and they're trying to finish their manuscripts. So one day they decide to basically make a little pact, like a deal, to help them through their writer's block. She usually writes romance, but she told him, you're going to write romance, and they swapped genres basically. So he usually writes literary fiction and she's the one who's going to write that, and so they're writing in a style that's very different to their usual. And as a means of doing, you know, research for their books and just like helping each other through writing this new kind of narrative, they spend a lot of time together, and it's such a sizzling slow burn. I love the fact that Emily Henry books really have like a nice build up to the intimacy and the spice. It's never overbearing. It's probably just the right amount of spice for me, and it really suits my tastes. I just thought that the characters were unforgettable. They were truly so well written, and I loved the fact that they felt really fleshed out and like real people, and it felt like them, like two very real people falling in real love, and that's what I look for in contemporary romance or rom-com. This definitely had more of a contemporary romance feel to me, and I would highly recommend it. It's probably going to be my favourite Emily Henry book. I don't think anything is going to top this, but I will probably give Funny Story a go at some point. Divine Rivals is so big on BookTok. Some of my favourite BookTokers were just raving about this book for months before I finally caved and picked it up, and at that point I just wasn't feeling romantasy so much, but honestly it's literally one of my favourite YA romantasies of all time. I loved it so much. Before I get into why I love these books so much, I just want to mention something regarding the boycott. So here in the UK, these are printed by HarperCollins, and I don't believe that's on the boycott list, but in the US and perhaps even in some other territories, I believe that Divine Rivals is printed by St. Martin's Press, and they are on the boycott list, and we are obviously pro-pal over here, so you definitely need to check out, you know, the boycott list. I don't want you to break boycott if you're in a territory where it's printed by a publisher that is just on the boycott list. You need to be careful about that, basically. So I picked this up over in the UK, and I have to say I love Rebecca Ross's writing style. These novels have very strong World War II vibes, like the style, like the characters were wearing trench coats and it was always raining, and they were like using typewriters and writing romantic letters to each other, and I just thought, what a unique and creative setting for a romantasy. I think that's what sets this book apart, this duology apart, if anything, that it's just so unique and well thought out. I think the magic element wasn't so strong, but that worked really well for me. I know that's quite a big criticism for people who are die-hard romantasy readers. They wanted more magic, but I think it was magical enough. So basically, this is the story of Iris Winnow and Roman Kitt. They are both working at the same newspaper. They're basically journalists who are like, they're like rival journalists. They're both vying for the same position at the, I think it's called the Oath Gazette, and so yeah, they're like rivals, and they have a lot of like intense comments that they throw at each other in the beginning of the novel, which I love. So they have a very different class background. Iris is from a lower class background, and she really struggles with her personal life. Her mum is an alcoholic, I believe, and her brother has actually gone off to fight in the war. There's like a war going on in the background, hence the World War II reference. Iris is basically struggling, and she really needs this new job. She really wants to make the columnist position so she can just, you know, have a good job and make more money and have a secure life. On the other hand, Roman Kitt is very well off, and he has a father who's quite controlling and patronizing, and he wants to secure the position of columnist so he can, in a sense, prove himself to his father, hence the intense rivalry between them. But the workplace, you know, enemies to lovers vibe, even though it's not much of a lovers vibe in the workplace, it's more of an enemies to vibe, but you just know they're going to be lovers. The enemies to lovers vibe in the workplace doesn't last for long, because they don't last in the workplace for long. There is a war waging on in the background, and then that gets involved very quickly, and that really just shifts the places they travel to and all the things they do as they continue being journalists and actually want to write articles about what's going on in the war. So they go towards the actual front lines of the war, and it does get really intense, but it's just written so well. I think the best thing about these novels has to be the letters. Honestly, like the declarations of just emotions and thoughts, and like, oh, just such beautiful words. So basically that's the only truly magical element in this novel, I would say. In these novels, it's the typewriters. So these characters unwittingly write letters to each other through typewriters that are magical. The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent is a new adult romantasy, and it's been described as the Hunger Games with vampires, and I think that's spot on. I think that just encapsulates the plot really quite well. So it's basically the story of Oriah, who is actually a human living amongst vampires. Her father, Vincent, who is basically like the king of vampires, he took pity on her when she was a child, or he just like bonded with her, and so he didn't want her killed, and he brought her into the palace and he's protected her, he's raised her as his own daughter, and she is trained as an assassin, so she can really hold her own and protect herself even though she's surrounded by vampires. Now this story surrounds the Kajari, which is a tournament that takes place where so many different vampires from 3 different houses are actually competing to win the favour of the goddess of death, Nyaxia. And so here's the interesting bit. Oriya enters this tournament because she wants to basically win what Nyaxia is offering. And one of the things I don't know if this is ruining the plot a little bit, but anyways, it's really important for Oriya to win this tournament so she can basically have extra protection as a human, because she constantly feels unsafe and Vincent isn't always there to protect her. And so the thing is, when she's in this tournament, it's like full of like warrior vampires that are really strong and have access to amazing magic. So she has to kind of bond with somebody who is a bit of an enemy, so it's like definitely got that enemies to lovers vibe, and his name is Rain. He's a really powerful vampire, and like they end up just working together, and things do get a bit steamy, and like I think the romance, it was slow burn and it was done really well, and I think you could really sense the fact that there was that distrust between them, especially from Oriya's side, who's a human and obviously at a disadvantage, surrounded by these really powerful vampires. So she's constantly on edge, but you see her slowly start to open up during the duration of the tournament, in which they have to do so many different like mini tasks and battles and things. And so yeah, I think it was during the 3rd part of the tournament that she really started bonding with him and like opening up, and I think yeah, that's when the steamy stuff started happening as well. So yeah, I loved the fact that it was a slow burn. I loved the fact that the emotion felt real, and like her, you know, reluctance to just be with someone who is essentially an enemy and a serious threat to her. I think, you know, that insta love in those kind of enemies to lovers situations just feels really off to me. So I think this was done really well. I think it's such a fun romantasy. It's definitely got elements of humour, the romance is intense, and I think the plot is definitely plotting. Like it's done quite well. Like there's a nice structure to the novel. Basically it is reminiscent of a few other romantasies, and I don't think it's particularly unique, but I think it is well written and it is a really good read. And finally we have Olivia Blake's One for My Enemy. Olivia Blake is honestly such a popular name on BookTok. She's literally everywhere and she has been writing so many books. This is actually the first novel by her that I've picked up, but I've heard all about the Atlas 6 and also Alone with You in the Ether. And there was another one, I think it's called Masters of Death. But yeah, there's just so many books, and every time she comes out with a book, everyone's raving about it. So this is the one that I picked up, and I totally see why people like her. I really love her writing style. I think it's beautifully lyrical, and it's also pacey and gripping, and the plot is genuinely really good. I think when an author can get all of that down, that is just art, okay? It's art and it's beautiful. And I think that's exactly what this is. I enjoyed this book so much. So this is basically like, I would say, a Romeo and Juliet, but with witches and set in contemporary New York. Now that's kind of like how the novel has been pitched as well, and I think it's quite an accurate pitch. That's why I've just expressed it in that sense. So it's basically the story of 2 groups of warring witches. So on the one hand we have the Antonova sisters, who are beautiful and deadly, and their mother Baba Yaga produces all sorts of intoxicants, and she kind of has a stronghold in the area for being a supplier for such things. And on the other hand you have the Fedorov brothers, and they are ruled by their crime boss father, and there's an old enmity between these different witches, the clans, or the covens I guess you would say. This is like adult romance, so it's not your typical like YA romantasy where things feel like really cozy and safe and predictable. It's quite intense, and I just think it's written so well, and it's so unpredictable. It's really gripping, and it's quite unique as well. I've definitely never read anything like this before, and I've never read witches done like this before. I really enjoyed all of the different elements to the story, you know, the family life, the history. There's a lot of like enemies to lovers to enemies, and like all of this stuff going on in the background, in the family history and the romances, and like the power stronghold. Like you know, the supply of different narcotics or drugs. It's just, there's so many different elements to the story, and I think they were woven together really well and they made for a really gripping plot. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about my favourite BookTok romance recommendations. Please do let me know if you've enjoyed reading anything that's been recommended to you by BookTok. Let me know in the comment section below and I may have to check it out as well. Please do remember to support me through liking, commenting, subscribing, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye!